The morning after our fire escape conversation, I woke to find Zoe already up, sitting by the window with her laptop and a cup of coffee. Early morning light caught in her hair, and she was wearing one of my old t-shirts that had somehow become her favorite piece of sleepwear. The sight of her there, solid and real and mine, still sometimes caught me off guard with its impossibility. "Good morning, dreamer," she said without looking up from her screen, but I could hear the smile in her voice. It had become our little joke, calling each other dreamer, a private acknowledgement of how we'd found each other. Some couples had songs or special places. We had shared unconscious experiences that had defied every rule of reality. "What are you working on so early?" I asked, padding to the kitchen to start another pot of coffee. "Actually, something related to us," she said, finally turning to face me. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about how the dreams were limited. It made me want to document this whole experience more thoroughly." I paused in measuring coffee grounds. "Document it how?" "I've been keeping detailed notes about everything we remember from the dreams, cross-referencing them with reality to see what matches and what doesn't. I thought maybe if we understood the mechanics of what happened to us, we might be able to help other people who go through something similar." The idea was quintessentially Zoe, turning our personal mystery into something that could benefit others. It was one of the things I loved most about her, this instinct to look outward even when processing something deeply personal. "Have you found any patterns?" I asked, bringing her a fresh cup of coffee and settling beside her on the window seat. She shifted her laptop so I could see the screen. She'd created an elaborate spreadsheet with columns for dream dates, locations, activities, emotional content, and corresponding real-world verification. The level of detail was impressive and slightly overwhelming. "Several, actually," she said, pointing to different sections of her analysis. "First, the dreams became more accurate over time. Early ones were more symbolic or generic, but the later ones contained specific details about real places and objects. Second, they seemed to be building toward our meeting, not just emotionally but practically. The dreams gave us information we'd need to recognize each other." I scanned the data, seeing our shared experience laid out in scientific terms. "What about timing? Did you find any correlation between when we had the dreams?" "That's the really interesting part," she said, highlighting a section of the spreadsheet. "We weren't having them on the same nights. Sometimes you'd dream about me on Tuesday and I'd dream about you on Thursday, but we'd both be experiencing the same scenario from different perspectives." I felt a chill run down my spine. "That's impossible. Dreams don't work that way." "I know. But look at this example." She pulled up a specific entry. "November 15th, you dreamed we were baking bread in a kitchen with yellow walls and herbs growing on the windowsill. November 17th, I dreamed about teaching someone to make my grandmother's bread recipe in my old apartment, the one I lived in during grad school that had yellow walls and that herb garden I kept by the window." I stared at the screen, remembering that dream vividly. I could still recall the feel of flour between my fingers, the way the dough had felt elastic and alive under my hands, the satisfaction of watching something rise and transform in the oven. "But I've never been to your old apartment," I said slowly. "And I've never made bread with anyone else using my grandmother's recipe. I'd never even told anyone that recipe before I met you. But somehow you experienced it accurately enough that when I made bread for you last month, you already knew the techniques." The implications were staggering. If our dreams hadn't been simultaneous, if they'd been separate experiences that somehow connected across time and space, then what we'd shared was even more extraordinary than we'd realized. "There's more," Zoe continued, her voice filled with the excitement of discovery. "I think the dreams were preparing us for more than just recognition. They were teaching us about each other in ways that would help us build a real relationship." She showed me another section of her analysis, this one focused on emotional content. The dreams had progressed from simple attraction through various stages of relationship development: learning to trust each other, sharing vulnerabilities, working through conflicts, building intimacy. It was like a condensed course in falling in love. It's almost like something was guiding the process, I said, though the words felt strange to speak aloud. Like there was an intelligence behind the dreams, helping us prepare for being together. Zoe nodded slowly. I've been wondering the same thing. And I think I might have found some evidence. She opened a new document, this one filled with research about documented cases of shared dreaming throughout history. There weren't many, but the few recorded instances showed remarkably similar patterns to what we'd experienced: gradual progression, increasing accuracy, eventual real-world meetings that felt predestined. Most of these cases involved people who ended up in significant relationships, she said. Romantic partners, lifelong friends, even some business partnerships that changed both people's lives. It's like shared dreaming is a mechanism for bringing together people who are meant to be connected. I spent the next hour reading through her research, fascinated despite myself. The rational part of my mind still rebelled against the idea that dreams could be anything more than brain activity during sleep. But the evidence was compelling, and more importantly, it matched our lived experience. What do you think causes it? I asked finally. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe some people are more psychically sensitive than others. Maybe there are quantum connections we don't understand yet. Maybe it's just random chance and we're looking for patterns that aren't really there. Do you believe that last one? She was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the city waking up around us. No, she said finally. What happened to us was too specific, too purposeful to be random. I think we were brought together intentionally, and the dreams were the method. By what, though? God? The universe? Some kind of cosmic matchmaking service? She laughed, but it was thoughtful rather than dismissive. Maybe all of those. Maybe none of them. Does it matter? I considered the question seriously. Did it matter what had caused our shared dreams, or was it enough that they'd led us to each other? I guess not, I said eventually. Whether it was supernatural intervention or just an extremely unlikely coincidence, the result is the same. We found each other and were happy. Exactly. She closed the laptop and curled up against me. Though I do think we should keep documenting everything. If this happens to other people, our experience might help them understand what's going on. Over the following weeks, I found myself paying more attention to the lingering effects of our shared dreaming experience. There were small things I hadn't noticed before. The way I instinctively knew what Zoe needed when she was stressed, how we often had the same random thoughts at the same time, the way we could communicate with just glances across a crowded room. Were these normal relationship developments, or were they remnants of the psychic connection that had brought us together? It was impossible to say for certain, but there was definitely something deeper than usual in the way we understood each other. I had lunch with Sarah yesterday, I told Zoe one evening as we cooked dinner together. She asked me how we got so in sync so quickly. Apparently it's obvious to everyone that we're unusually connected. Zoe paused in chopping vegetables. What did you tell her? That some people just click, I said, which was true even if it wasn't the complete truth. But it made me wonder if the dreams left us with some kind of ongoing connection. You mean like we're still psychically linked somehow? The way she said it, with genuine curiosity rather than skepticism, was one of the things I loved about Zoe. She approached everything with an open mind, willing to consider possibilities that others might dismiss out of hand. Maybe. Haven't you noticed how often we think the same thing at the same time? Or how I can tell when you're having a bad day even when you're trying to hide it? She set down her knife and turned to face me fully. I have noticed that. But couldn't that just be us being particularly compatible? Some couples develop that kind of intuitive connection. After a few months of dating? Sarah has been with Jake for 3 years and they still miscommunicate constantly. We stood looking at each other across the kitchen, both of us processing the implications of what we were discussing. If the dreams had left us with some kind of lasting psychic connection, it would explain a lot about why our relationship felt so natural and effortless. "There's one way to test it," Zoe said slowly. "What do you mean?" "Well, if we're still connected the way we were in dreams, maybe we can still share experiences across distance. Maybe the dreaming was just the beginning." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Part of me wanted to explore every aspect of this extraordinary thing that had happened to us, but another part worried about what we might discover or what it might mean for our relationship if we were connected in ways that went beyond normal human experience. "What kind of test?" I asked. "Something simple. Tomorrow I'll be at the library all day working on my dissertation. You'll be at the office. At exactly 3 p.m. I'll try to send you a mental message, just a simple image or word. See if you receive anything." It sounded like something out of a movie, but then again, so had the entire beginning of our relationship. If shared dreaming was possible, maybe other forms of psychic connection were too. "Okay," I said. "But what if it doesn't work? What if the dreams were a one-time thing and now we're just normal people in a normal relationship?" Zoe came over and wrapped her arms around me. "Then we're normal people in an extraordinary relationship that happened to start in the most impossible way imaginable. That's still pretty amazing." The next day, I found myself watching the clock obsessively as 3 p.m. approached. I was in a meeting that was running long, listening to my boss discuss quarterly projections, when suddenly I had an overwhelming mental image of sunflowers. Not just the generic idea of sunflowers, but a specific painting of them, thick brush strokes, vibrant yellows and oranges, unmistakably Van Gogh's style. The image was so vivid and sudden that I actually gasped, earning strange looks from my colleagues. I mumbled an excuse about feeling dizzy and stepped out of the conference room to text Zoe. "Sunflowers?" I typed. Her response came immediately. "Van Gogh's Sunflowers." I was looking at a reproduction in an art history book. "Did you really get that?" I stared at my phone, feeling that familiar mixture of excitement and disbelief that had characterized so much of our relationship. We were still connected. The dreams might have ended, but whatever force had brought us together was still active in our lives. Over the next few weeks, we conducted more experiments. Sometimes they worked perfectly. I'd receive clear images or emotions that Zoe was consciously sending. Other times, nothing came through, or I'd pick up something completely different from what she'd intended to transmit. But the success rate was far higher than chance would explain. "I think it works best when we're both relaxed and focused," Zoe observed after a particularly successful session where she'd managed to send me not just an image, but also the emotional content associated with it. A memory of her grandmother's garden that left me feeling nostalgic for a childhood I'd never lived. "And when we're thinking about each other with love," I added, "the connection seems stronger when it's motivated by affection rather than just curiosity." We began incorporating these moments of intentional connection into our daily routine. When one of us was having a difficult day, the other would send mental comfort. When we were apart for work or other obligations, we'd share small moments of beauty or joy across whatever distance separated us. It wasn't constant and it wasn't always reliable. We were still very much two separate people living individual lives. But there was an underlying current of connection that made our relationship feel blessed in ways I couldn't adequately explain to anyone else. "Do you ever worry about it?" Zoe asked one night as we lay in bed, her head on my chest. "About being connected to someone in ways that go beyond what most people experience?" I stroked her hair, considering the question. "Sometimes. It makes us different from other couples, and different can be isolating. But mostly I feel grateful." "For the connection?" "For you," I said simply. "However we found each other, whatever forces brought us together, the end result is that I get to love you and be loved by you. Everything else is just interesting details." She was quiet for a moment, then lifted her head to look at me. Even if it means we can never have a completely normal relationship? Even if people wouldn't believe our story if we told them? Especially then, I said, pulling her up for a kiss. Normal is overrated. What we have is magical, literally magical. Why would I want to trade that for ordinary? As our first anniversary of meeting approached, we decided to return to Washington Square Park, to the fountain where our impossible journey had become reality. It was November again, crisp and bright, with leaves scattered across the paths like confetti from some cosmic celebration. Do you remember what you were thinking when you first saw me? Zoe asked as we sat on the same bench where I'd waited nervously a year earlier. That it couldn't be real, I said. That people don't walk out of dreams into parks in Manhattan. That I was probably having some kind of breakdown. And now, I looked at her, taking in all the details that dreams couldn't capture. The way afternoon light brought out gold highlights in her dark hair, the small scar near her eyebrow from a childhood accident, the laugh lines that had deepened over the months we'd been together. Now I think reality is much stranger and more wonderful than most people realize, I said. I think the universe has ways of bringing people together that we don't understand, and I think we're incredibly lucky to have experienced something so extraordinary. She leaned against me, and I felt that familiar warmth that had characterized every interaction we'd had, sleeping or waking, from the very beginning. No regrets? She asked. Only that it took 3 months of dreams to bring us together instead of happening sooner. Maybe it needed to take that long, she said thoughtfully. Maybe we needed time to prepare, to build the foundation in dreams before we could handle the reality. I considered this, thinking about how emotionally intense those first few weeks of dreaming had been, how I'd struggled to understand what was happening to me. If Zoe had appeared in my life without that gradual introduction through dreams, would I have been ready for the depth of connection we shared? You might be right, I said. Maybe the dreams were as much about preparing us as they were about bringing us together. A courtship that happened in sleep, she mused. I like that idea. As evening approached and the park began to empty, we stayed on our bench, talking about the past year and the future we were building together. The conversation was comfortable and familiar, but underneath it was that current of deeper connection that had defined our relationship from the beginning. I love you, I said as the first stars became visible in the darkening sky. I love you too, she replied, and in those simple words I heard echoes of all the dreams that had brought us to this moment, all the impossible synchronicities that had woven our lives together. We walked home hand in hand, two women who had found each other across the strangest possible circumstances and built something real and lasting from shared dreams. Behind us, the fountain stood silent in the growing darkness, witness to the moment when fantasy had become reality and two separate lives had become one extraordinary love story. 6 months after our first anniversary, Zoe made a discovery that changed everything we thought we understood about our connection. She'd been working late in the library, researching her dissertation on Renaissance art symbolism, when she came across a reference to something called oniric correspondence in a 16th century manuscript. The term was unfamiliar, but as she dug deeper into historical texts, she found scattered references to the phenomenon throughout different cultures and time periods. Emma, you need to see this, she said when she burst through our apartment door that evening, her arms full of photocopied pages and her eyes bright with discovery. I looked up from where I'd been grading papers at the kitchen table. What did you find? She spread the documents across the table, pushing my work aside with barely contained excitement. Evidence that what happened to us isn't unique. It's rare, but it's been documented throughout history under different names in different cultures. The pages were filled with translations of ancient texts, academic papers, and historical accounts. As I began reading, I felt that familiar mixture of fascination and disbelief that had characterized so much of our relationship. Look at this, Zoe said, pointing to a translation of a medieval European text. It describes soul dreams that connected two people across great distances, allowing them to know each other before they met in the physical world. I read the passage carefully. The language was archaic and flowery, but the description was unmistakably similar to what we'd experienced. Two people, unknown to each other in waking life, who shared detailed dreams that eventually led to a real-world meeting and lifelong bond. And this one, she continued, showing me another document. From Japan, describing Yum no Kazuna, dream bonds that tied people together before their physical paths crossed. Page after page contained similar accounts. Aboriginal Australian concepts of shared dreamtime experiences. Native American traditions of spirit-guided dream connections. Even modern psychological studies documenting cases of what researchers cautiously termed anomalous shared dreaming experiences. This is incredible, I said, scanning through the materials. You're telling me that what happened to us has been happening to people throughout history? Not just happening, Zoe said, settling beside me and pulling out what appeared to be her most significant find. Being recognized and honored. Some cultures considered it a sacred form of connection, proof that certain souls were meant to find each other. She showed me a translation of an ancient Celtic text that described dream-bound lovers as blessed by the otherworld and destined for unions that would last beyond death itself. The poetic language was beautiful, but it was the underlying concept that made my breath catch, the idea that our connection was not just unusual but spiritually significant. Do you think that's what we are? I asked quietly. Blessed by otherworldly forces? Zoe was quiet for a moment, studying the pages spread between us. I think we're part of something larger than we understood, she said finally. Whether you call it spiritual blessing, quantum entanglement, or just an extremely rare neurological phenomenon, we're connected in ways that transcend normal human experience. Over the following weeks, we dove deep into research about shared dreaming and psychic connections. Zoe approached it with academic rigor, while I found myself drawn to the more mystical interpretations. Together, we began to piece together a broader understanding of what we'd experienced. The historical accounts were remarkably consistent across cultures and time periods. Shared dreamers typically went through similar phases: initial random encounters in sleep, increasing frequency and emotional intensity, growing accuracy of details, and finally real-world meetings that felt predestined. Most documented cases resulted in profound, lasting relationships. But here's what's really interesting, Zoe said one evening as we compared our timeline to the historical patterns. In cultures that recognized and supported these connections, the relationships seemed to develop more smoothly than in societies that dismissed them as fantasy or delusion. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning that when people understood what was happening to them and saw it as meaningful rather than impossible, they were better able to navigate the transition from dream connection to real-world relationship. I thought about our own experience, how the initial disbelief and confusion had given way to acceptance and eventually celebration of our unusual beginning. We'd been lucky to find each other quickly and to both experience the same phenomena. Other dream-connected couples might not be so fortunate. That gives me an idea, I said slowly. Oh no, I know that expression. What are you plotting? I grinned at her. She did know me well in dreams and in waking life. What if we created some kind of resource for other people who might be going through what we went through? A way for them to understand that they're not crazy, that this is a real phenomenon with a long history. Zoe's eyes lit up. Like a support network? Exactly. Think about how isolating it was before we found each other. How would it feel to discover that you're not alone, that other people have experienced shared dreaming and built successful relationships from it? The idea energized both of us. Over the next several months, we began developing what we initially called the Dream Connection Project. We created a website with information about shared dreaming throughout history, guidelines for people who thought they might be experiencing it, and a secure forum where individuals could share their stories and connect with others. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks of launching, we were hearing from people all over the world who had experienced various forms of shared dreaming. Some were still in the dream phase, searching for their real-world counterparts. Others had found each other but were struggling to understand what had happened to them. A few had been together for years but had never spoken publicly about their unusual beginning. "Listen to this," Zoe said one morning, reading messages from the forum. "A woman in Sweden has been dreaming about the same man for 6 months. She's found clues that suggest he lives in Toronto, and she's planning a trip to try to find him." "And this one," I added, scanning my own messages, "is from a couple in Australia who met through shared dreams 15 years ago. They want to share their story to help other people understand that these connections can last." We began organizing virtual meetups for dream-connected individuals, providing a space where they could share experiences and support each other through the unique challenges of their situations. The community grew rapidly, and we found ourselves at the center of an informal network of people whose love stories defied conventional explanation. But perhaps the most significant development came 8 months after we'd launched the project. We received a message from Dr. Helena Rodriguez, a researcher at Stanford who had been quietly studying anomalous dreaming experiences for over a decade. "I've been following your work with great interest," she wrote. "I wonder if you'd be willing to participate in a formal study of shared dreaming phenomena. Your documented experience and community connections could be invaluable in advancing our understanding of these occurrences." The idea of being research subjects was both exciting and daunting. We'd grown comfortable with our private miracle, but submitting to scientific scrutiny felt like exposing something sacred to potential dissection. "What do you think?" Zoe asked after we'd talked it over for several days. "I think we owe it to everyone else who's experienced this to help legitimize it scientifically," I said. "If researchers can document and study shared dreaming, maybe future dream-connected couples won't have to wonder if they're losing their minds." Dr. Rodriguez's study was comprehensive and respectful. She interviewed us extensively about our experiences, had us undergo various psychological and neurological tests, and even monitored our brain activity during periods when we attempted conscious psychic communication. The results were fascinating. "Your brains show unusual synchronization patterns during focused connection attempts," she explained during our final consultation. "When one of you is sending and the other receiving, your neural oscillations begin to match in ways we don't typically see between separate individuals." "What does that mean, practically speaking?" Zoe asked. "It suggests that your brains have developed the ability to entrain with each other, to synchronize their electrical activity in ways that might facilitate information transfer. We're still years away from understanding the mechanism, but this is the first concrete neurological evidence I've seen that shared consciousness experiences might have a physical basis." The validation was both thrilling and humbling. Our love story wasn't just romantic fantasy. It was a documented case study in the expanding frontiers of human consciousness research. As word spread about Dr. Rodriguez's findings, we began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and universities. The topic of shared dreaming was moving from the realm of mystical curiosity into legitimate academic investigation, and we found ourselves unexpected ambassadors for a phenomenon that was touching more lives than anyone had realized. "Sometimes I can't believe this is our life," I said to Zoe one evening as we prepared for a presentation at NYU. 2 years ago, I was just a marketing copywriter having weird dreams. Now we're consulting on consciousness research and helping people around the world understand their psychic connections. "Do you miss being anonymous?" she asked, adjusting my collar with the casual intimacy that had characterized every interaction since our first meeting. I considered the question seriously. Our story had become public in ways we'd never anticipated, and with that visibility came both opportunities and challenges. Some people dismissed us as delusional, while others elevated our experience to almost mythical status. Neither extreme was entirely comfortable. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think about all the messages we get from people who say our story helped them understand their own experiences, or gave them courage to pursue someone they'd been dreaming about, or just made them feel less alone in the world. that makes it worth the loss of privacy. Even when skeptics call us fraudsters or attention seekers, even then, science progresses by investigating things that seem impossible. If our experience helps researchers understand consciousness better or helps other dream-connected people find each other, then I'm okay with being a curiosity. The truth was, our relationship had only grown stronger under scrutiny. Being asked to articulate what we meant to each other, to document our connection for scientific study, to share our story with the world, all of it had deepened our understanding of what we'd found together. Our psychic connection continued to evolve as well. What had started as occasional successful experiments in mental communication had become an integrated part of our relationship. We could sense each other's emotions across distances, share wordless comfort during difficult times, and experience moments of profound unity that went beyond normal intimacy. "I had the most interesting experience at work today," Zoe told me one evening as we cooked dinner together. "Let me guess," I said, not looking up from the vegetables I was chopping. "Around 2:30, you suddenly felt incredibly happy and proud, even though nothing particularly good was happening in your day." She stared at me. "How did you know that?" "Because at 2:30, I got news that our biggest client was renewing their contract for another year. The feeling was so intense that I tried to share it with you." "And it worked," she said wonderfully. "I was having a terrible day. My advisor had criticized my latest chapter draft, I'd spilled soup on my favorite shirt, everything was going wrong. Then suddenly I felt this wave of joy and accomplishment that didn't make sense with anything I was experiencing. But it made me smile anyway." These moments of spontaneous connection happened regularly now, though we'd learned to distinguish between our own emotions and those we were receiving from each other. It was like being fluent in a language that only we spoke, a form of communication that existed beneath words and beyond normal sensory experience. "Do you think it will keep evolving?" I asked as we settled onto the couch after dinner. "Our connection, I mean. Will we become even more linked as time goes on?" Zoe curled up against me, her head finding its familiar place on my shoulder. "I hope so," she said. "I love being connected to you in every possible way. Even if it means we become less like normal people?" "We stopped being normal people the night we started sharing dreams," she reminded me. "Now we're just becoming more ourselves, whatever that means for us specifically." As our third year together began, we noticed new dimensions to our connection. Sometimes we'd have the same random thoughts simultaneously. Other times, we'd wake from ordinary dreams to find we'd been having conversations in our sleep, continuing discussions we'd started before bed. Once, when Zoe was traveling for a conference, I woke in the middle of the night with the absolute certainty that she was in danger, only to receive a text 15 minutes later saying she'd narrowly avoided a car accident. "It's like we're becoming two parts of the same consciousness," she observed during one of our regular discussions about these developments. "Does that worry you? The idea of losing your individuality?" She shook her head immediately. "We're not losing ourselves. If anything, I feel more like myself than ever before. It's just that myself now includes being connected to you." I understood exactly what she meant. Our psychic connection didn't diminish our separate identities, it enhanced them. I was still Emma, with my own thoughts and feelings and perspectives. But I was also Emma connected to Zoe, which was a richer, more complete version of myself than I'd ever imagined possible. The Dream Connection project continued to grow, eventually becoming a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting people with unusual consciousness experiences. We heard from hundreds of dream-connected couples, but also from individuals experiencing other forms of psychic phenomena, shared visions, telepathic friendships, even some families who seem to have generational psychic bonds. "I think we've stumbled onto something much bigger than just romantic dream connections," Zoe said one day as we reviewed applications for our latest round of research grants. "We're documenting the leading edge of human consciousness evolution." It was a grandiose way to think about our work, but the evidence was compelling. Rates of reported psychic experiences were increasing, possibly due to better communication networks allowing people to find others with similar experiences, or possibly because human consciousness was genuinely expanding in ways science hadn't yet recognized. "Whatever we've stumbled onto," I said, "I'm grateful we found each other first, before we found the cause." "Why?" "Because it means our relationship is based on love, not on fascination with our psychic abilities. We fell in love in dreams before we understood we were having psychic experiences. That makes us different from people who come together because they're interested in exploring consciousness. We're consciousness explorers because we came together." Zoe smiled and took my hand, and as always, I felt that electric connection that had characterized every touch between us since the beginning. "I love that we built something real before we understood it was impossible," she said. As I looked at this remarkable woman who had first appeared to me in sleep, who had become my partner in every possible way, I realized that our story was still being written. The dreams had brought us together, but everything since then had been a choice: to believe in each other, to build a life together, to remain open to whatever new dimensions our connection might develop. "What do you think comes next?" I asked. "More dreams," she said with certainty. "Different dreams than before, but dreams nonetheless. We're dream people, Emma. That's who we are and who we'll always be." And as if summoned by her words, I felt that familiar drowsiness beginning to overtake me, the gentle slide toward sleep where anything was possible and love could transcend every boundary reality tried to impose.